With the president ramping up his attacks on Fed Chair Powell. For more on all of that, let's bring in Roger Altman now, Evercore founder and senior chairman. Also, the former deputy U.S. Treasury Secretary. It's nice to see you in Post 9.
Hey, Scott.
Is that what this is, do you think, a quote-unquote sell America? Wall Street Journal today writing about that, saying that that trade is the worst since 2008. What do you think?
Well, I think there's some beginning evidence of that, but too soon to say it's a sweeping trend. What evidence is there? So you see again today, and this is alarming, the combination of falling equity prices, falling bond prices, and therefore higher yields, and a weaker dollar. Because normally, when yields rise, the dollar rises because people get paid more to hold it. So you have to conclude that investors are now desiring a higher risk premium to own U.S. assets, and you have to think there's some capital outflow going on with a greater preference at the margin for foreign assets and gold as compared to U.S. assets, because you see an all-time high in gold and you see a 3-year low in dollar-euro, for example.
Every Treasury Department is obviously different. As part of your intro, we introduced you as a former deputy U.S. Treasury Secretary. What do you think is happening within the most important offices in the Treasury Department as this is taking place? I mean, how do you feel this is being digested with an apparent flight from assets here? Bonds, the dollar, et cetera. I mean, especially the dollar.
Well, first of all, you have to be concerned. And you have to feel that it's not good. Second of all, if you have any sense of the history of the country and the economic history of the country, you say to yourself, the United States has benefited from an independent Federal Reserve System for over 110 years. And investors, businesses, consumers can count on the Fed to objectively pursue its twin mandate of stable prices and maximum employment. And imagine if we hadn't had a fully independent Fed in 2008 to 2009, or when COVID first erupted, when the Fed stepped in and essentially saved the system, both those times. And as Austin Goolsbee said on this network earlier this morning, look at countries that don't have an independent central bank. You could pick Turkey, you could pick any number of others. Typically, inflation is higher, growth is slower, and employment is lower. And there's a real clear history there. And if you're in the Treasury, you're cognizant of it.
You use a word that I want to come back at you at for a moment. You said objective when talking about the Fed. Independence and objectivity are two different things. There are some who suggest that this Fed hasn't been objective at times, that they've been political. And that's one of the criticisms that the president has had against Jay Powell, I think, including in today's social media post. How would you respond to that?
Well, I myself have not noticed or detected a political element to the Fed as long as Jay Powell has been the chairman. Has the Fed been perfect? No. When inflation first surged following the eruption of COVID, he described it as transitory, and it turned out to be anything but transitory. And then the Fed had to catch up, as we all know. We're all familiar with that mistake they made. So the Fed isn't perfect. I mean, anybody, including them, can make bad judgments. But I haven't noticed the Fed during his tenure
cutting close to the election?
To be political. I really haven't.
You don't think cutting close to the election this time sort of got you into, a little bit of an area of concern? I mean, that's what some critics have suggested.
I understand, but if you go back and read the research on the Fed last year, for example, Krishna Guha, fortunately, is at Evercore, and I think he's the best Fed watcher there is. And if you were to go back and read his commentary in 2024, including at the beginning of the year, you see what he predicted, and that last cut of the year, it was consistent with what he was seeing in the early part of the year. It wasn't a last-minute political thing. Now, has the Fed ever considered politics in its 13-year history? Probably has. I can remember when I was first in the Treasury, Arthur Burns was then the Fed chairman, and a lot of people were critical of Burns for being too political. So maybe there have been moments when the Fed has tilted politically, but I don't think they've been egregious. And I think most people would say, over its history, the Fed has lived up to its independence.
Do you worry about the president actually trying to fire Chair Powell?
I do. I do worry about it because President Trump is a decisive guy, and often people don't take him seriously when he threatens certain things, and often he turns out to follow through and do them.